Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is if you have your natal moon opposing Chiron, the wounded healer, the asteroid that's our core wound. And so you want to look at what sign and house your Chiron is in, because it's going to give more of an indication about your wounding, the nature of your wounding, and it's both of those things that I mentioned, like what house it's in, what sign is it in, are both going to be part of it, but not the whole picture, because you're also looking at aspects to Chiron too. And in this case, we have the moon, which is our emotional nature, our relationship with our mother, opposing Chiron. I have this. And one of the interesting things that I discovered through doing all these videos and working with clients is that I realized that it kind of like solves the mystery of why I was so emotional growing up, and I had the moon in Virgo, which is an earth sign, isn't connected to having an overtly emotional nature. And I really did. And so I realized it's because of this opposition. So the moon can be like your mother. And again, look to the sign that the moon is in for information about how she was, how she behaved towards you. With this particular opposition, the mother may have not nurtured you properly in some way. Remember that you can have your mother in your life and it looks okay on paper, like you don't feel that anything on the physical level was neglected. But remember that we are emotional beings as well. It's not just about keeping the body alive. And so some children experience not having a nurturing mother, and that can create a wound. And with the opposition, we're talking about projection. I decided sometimes I lump in the square and the opposition, which are both challenging aspects, into one video, but this time I decided to take them separately. And the opposition can be your relationships with other people. And I would say, especially like with a significant other, where your emotions are going to be more engaged. It's easy to be detached when you have friends, a lot of times, because you're kind of keeping it on the surface. I realize that's not the case 100% of the time. So if you have a very intense friendship, or just a very, very close friendship, you may be much more likely to really be emotionally vulnerable with that person. But I would say it's not uncommon for people to be more on the surface. So this could be where you feel that sense of emotional incompletion and you're looking for another person to provide you with it. And I would say it's not just like feeling emotionally fulfilled, but feeling emotionally nurtured. So you might be particularly sensitive to any kind of relationship. And when I use the word relationship, I'm talking about like with a significant other, where you feel like the other person is neglecting you in some way, not giving you enough attention, not being gentle enough with you, or what we would perceive as emotional caring, because this is already a wound in you. So it's a very sore subject, a very tender area. So you're more susceptible to those kinds of feelings Whereas somebody else, they might not have that same need. And it doesn't make you wrong. It doesn't mean that you're overemphasizing it. However, the problem is that, well, I mean, sometimes it might. Sometimes you might be too in need of it. But the problem is that if you require another person to show up for you in a certain way, then you're giving them all your power. And that's where it can get tricky. The moon can be the way that we feel safe. And with this opposition, continuing with the mother wound, the child may grow up not feeling safe in general. And that can lead to, further complications and issues in life. But the other thing is, on an emotional level, you may feel this sense of something isn't right because I didn't receive this nurturing. I think that the kind of signs that would be most susceptible to that are like Cancer, if your moon is in Cancer, and, in Chiron would likely be, like it's opposing it from Capricorn. Um, so the, but I'm speaking about the moon, or if your moon is in Pisces or something like that, where there is already with the moon an emotional need and it's exacerbated by being in a water sign. I always leave Scorpio out of the mix because I feel like Scorpio is like a different animal, even though it's also a water sign. So that can leave you already feeling a deficit and also feeling like unsafe because you're not cared for. And what I'm trying to say is that it's not going to necessarily translate that every person with this opposition is going to feel unsafe in that way, but they may feel that they were not given the emotional support that they needed, and that could definitely result in a sense of vulnerability. And in some cases, it may feel more safe to appear invulnerable. So let's say you have the moon in Aquarius, you may really emphasize that detachment that is naturally occurring because you don't want to seem like you need somebody's emotions, because when you were young, you may have felt abandoned by your mother, even if she was right in the same room with you. And in order to survive, you had to suppress that need, because otherwise, when you need something that you can't obtain, that's going to be very problematic. That's going to feel like out of control. So that's why people have a tendency to do that, to be self-protective. But we can carry these things into adulthood, and then using the moon in Aquarius as an example, the person can shut down emotionally at the drop of a hat. And again, they're doing so to protect themselves. And by the way, I do believe like somebody with this opposition might shut down when they're actually getting close emotionally to someone, because in that scenario, it might be something that feels threatening. Even if that other person is doing all the right things, it can feel so unfamiliar that it seems dangerous in some ways. So it can get quite complicated with these hard angles, because there's like conflicting needs. The person wants desperately to be nurtured, but they're, when you get to be an adult, you can't really experience that the same way a child does. Children are helpless, you could say. So when we are comforting them, it's coming from a position of they don't know what is going on in their reality. When you become an adult, you know what you're dealing with, all the struggles. And so it's not about treating such a person like a child, like a helpless child. And so it can be difficult for others to know exactly what your emotional needs are, but you may be very aware that you feel like you need something from others. This is particularly acute in the opposition, looking to other people for that. And you may simply feel that there's something about your emotional nature that is not quite right. I would think in some cases, not all, with the opposition, that there could be like a bipolarity, because it's like a lack of integration. So it might swing from one to the other and appear a bit unstable, or in some cases even volatile. Like, for instance, if you have the moon in Aries and compared to Libra, which is very, it doesn't get much more bipolar than that. I'm talking about, the word bipolar simply means two sides, or I don't know if polar means sides, or you could say opposites. And when you have opposites, they tend to be extremes, right? So Aries, ruled by the god of war. Somebody with the moon in Aries can have a very volatile emotional nature. So they may get angry very quickly and then they cool down very quickly. But Chiron is in Libra, and it needs, the woundedness is about peace, about balance. And that could feel very threatening, one's own emotional reactions or reactivity. So these kinds of things can sometimes lead to being of two minds emotionally, for lack of a better way of saying it. I think one of the things that we always have to look at first and foremost is that we have this woundedness, because I think the danger with the opposition is the tendency to project, and really sometimes that can lead to blaming other people in your life for not caring. How many times have we heard somebody say, "You don't love me, you don't care," and it's because they really, honestly, it's not really manipulation. I think sometimes people really do feel like, I'm an empty cup and you won't fill my cup. And they don't realize that they're demanding something of others that can never be fulfilled, because if someone has a hole in their soul, and I think that was something that John Bradshaw, the late psychologist, coined. I don't know. But if they do have a hole in their soul, it's going to be very difficult. No, it's going to be impossible for anyone outside of themselves to fill that, heal that. That's why we talk about the wounded healer. You're healing yourself. That's part of the spiritual challenge in the spiritual journey, and then you heal other people. And that's actually how a person heals themselves, is through others. So one of the biggest ways is to get outside of yourself and get outside, let go of that story. I know it's easier said than done, but you don't have to feed it, in other words. In other words, not repeating to other people, this is what happened to me, this is the kind of neglect that I suffered, and really trying to focus on others who are in even more dire straits, because that is kind of the road to recovery, is not being self-absorbed and self-pitying and accusatory, having these unrealistic expectations about what other people are capable of doing in order to heal yourself, and picking up the reins of the horse and really committing to your own self-growth and self-healing. I wouldn't doubt that there are many people with this aspect that have trust issues, and especially with females. Certainly when I was growing up, I had a lot of male friends. And what you can do in that case is, first of all, be a friend to yourself. Like, don't, learn how to practice self-care. There are all kinds of videos. If you don't even know what that means, you can look that up. But be committed to your own growth, personal growth. Like, rather than focusing on what you didn't get growing up, it's like reparenting, and you're doing it. The way out is in. And when it comes to community, finding like-minded people, could be through a spiritual center. It could be through an artistic type of organization, that you find the people that you really resonate with, and that where one's emotions freely flow. If you go to a nightclub, people are like probably doing the exact opposite. If you're in a setting where people are discussing emotions, like maybe it's some kind of a spiritual workshop, or maybe like if you're at a community theater and you're playing these roles that are supercharged with emotion and discussing the characters, you're discussing, human nature. It doesn't really matter. I mean, it's therapeutic because of that. So it's being proactive, being, realizing that only you can heal yourself, but you can enlist other people in that process, other healers. But they say that we have to agree that we want to be healed for it to happen. That it's not somebody else actually doing anything. It's us giving ourselves permission to heal, ultimately. All right, that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.